Excellent. All right. I'm gonna let folks in the Zoom here as we get going on social.
There we go. We're good. Have fun.
Awesome. You want to let folks in out of the waiting room, Quinn? There we go. Hi, folks. Welcome, welcome. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. So happy you're here. Very excited to have folks joining us for this Ask Me Anything with Andrew Yang. It's going to be really fun. We've got a lot of good questions that got submitted, hopefully by some of you who are joining the call. And while we're just waiting a couple minutes here to get started and for more folks to join, if you just want to put in the chat where you're calling in from, that would be super great just to see where folks are, including folks on social who are watching the live stream here. So we'll take a second to do that. Okay, we got Pittsburgh, Boise, all right, St. Louis, New York, Seattle. All right, we got some good representation so far. This is good. I see someone in from Chicago, where I am. Love it. New Orleans, Virginia, Ohio. Okay, this is awesome. Great. And then while you're doing that, Quinn is actually going to put a little poll up because we're really curious to see how you're feeling about the election next week. You can answer the poll if you're on social, just you can put it in the social chat. But the question is, how do you feel about the election next week? It's very soon. It's coming around the corner. And the options are optimistic, nervous, indifferent, excited, concerned, all of the above, because some of us have a lot of emotions and feelings. So you can have them all. So super excited to be talking about the election and, especially talking about, what Andrew's up to and what he's focused on. So I see a lot of concerned, 50% concerned, 27% all of the above. If folks want to keep putting in where they're calling in from and how they're feeling about the election, that would be awesome. We got someone on the ballot. All right, that's cool. We are great. We got some questions, I think, Andrew, for people who are running for office to get some advice from you. So I think that'll be great when we get to those questions. All right, with that, since we're 2 minutes in here, I'm going to get us started. So welcome, Andrew. We're so happy you're here. How's it going?
It's going great. It's wonderful to be here with so many independents who are trying to create better choices at the ballot, including some candidates. I actually feel like meeting the candidates. I love candidates.
Yes, I am with you completely. We've got a lot of candidates going on, and I'll just quickly introduce myself and goodparty.org, and then we're going to get straight into the many, many questions that folks asked. So I'm Victoria Mitchell. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at goodparty.org. We're very grateful to be partners with the Forward Party and connected with Andrew's work for many years. At goodparty.org, we are changing the broken two-party system by empowering independent and third-party candidates to transform civic leadership. That's what we're about. And the way we're doing that is by leveling the playing field. So third-party candidates like those running with the Forward Party, which we'll hear about from Andrew, and then independents, nonpartisans, so that they can compete with Republicans and with Democrats. And so we provide the software tools that help them run and win their elections. And also coming soon, we're excited to be rolling out tools that will help those winners represent and serve their constituents. So that includes AI campaign manager and voter data and the things that these candidates really need to be on a level playing field. So we're essentially the tools behind this rising independent movement that's been going on for many years and I think is really exciting right now. We're focused on the local and the state races, the groundswell, the grassroots. Last year, we had 52 candidates. We got our first win ever after many years of working on this stuff and 11 wins total. And then exciting news about an hour ago, I just looked and we have 6,464 independent candidates running this year with goodparty.org. It's been growing. Like you look at that chart and it just goes up every single week. They're in all 50 states. They're urban, suburban, they're rural. They're across the ideological spectrum as long as they're independent of the two parties, people powered, anti-corruption and civil. And we've already had 665 elections this year, in the local races that happened earlier in the year. And so far, 270 candidates have won their elections. And so anyone who's a math fan, like a lot of folks who are in Andrew's world, that's a 41% win rate. And we'll see what happens next Tuesday, where there'll be over 6,000 candidates going on, the ballot. But we're really hopeful. We had hoped to get 1,000 wins this year. That was our goal that we set in January. But right now, you guys are kind of the first to know, since we're feeling more confident than ever. We're projecting over 2,000 candidates will win their elections this year. So it'll be 2,000 independent, people-powered, anti-corruption, civil folks representing their communities, which is so exciting. So make sure you're following us and connected to see what the real numbers end up being next Tuesday. We got to see it when the dust settles, of course. We're not connected with any presidential races or candidates this year. We're just focused on the grassroots side, because the city councilors, the mayors, the state reps of this year, they're the civic heroes who can and will move up into higher offices in 2026 and 2028. So a lot of really exciting stuff going on. Just wanted to lay that context to connect it to some of the themes I think we'll be speaking with Andrew, and a lot of the overlap that we share, and the work that we've been doing. And if you want to hear more about our organization, and our founder Farhad Mohit was on Andrew's podcast recently, so Quinn will drop that link in the chat if you want to watch that afterward and get a little bit of a deeper dive on what's going on. So, and Farhad's will be in the chat today, answering anyone's thoughts and questions too as the conversation rolls here. So without further ado, Andrew, would love to hear from you. Just, I guess a quick intro that most people here I think know who you are, otherwise they wouldn't be here. And just share what you've been up to lately. What are you focused on right now? What are the big things in your world? And then we're going to dive into the questions.
Well, thanks so much, Victoria. Thank you all for being here. I will say, I sat with Farhad, the founder of Good Party. Now it must have been between 2 and 3 years ago. And we were talking about things, and I think I might have thrown out this 1,000 official number. And so it really inspires me that it looks like it might be happening as soon as November. So for those of you who don't know what Good Party is about, Good Party is trying to help independents compete on a level playing field with Dems and Republicans, which is very, very difficult. But Farhad and his team are technologists and innovators. And so they said, you know what, let's see if we can't develop tech tools, including the use of AI, to try and supercharge independent campaigns. And you know what they charge? Big fat zero, because they're genuine idealists. They want folks to be able to compete and win. Oh, look, I actually see Farhad's handsome face. What's up, Farhad? Yeah, let's go. If you guys don't know who Farhad Mohit is, he's a freaking hero of mine, honestly. So Farhad said, let's make it free, and let's just try and charge everyone up. And that conversation with Farhad might have been 2.5 to 3 years ago. And so Farhad is the genuine article where here he is, 3 years later. I think he actually got started well before that.
2019, it goes way back. Oh yeah.
I'm giving him too little credit. So this is in many ways Farhad's vision come to life. And Good Party and Forward Party are really like hand in hand, because we also want to build infrastructure so that independents can compete and win. And we're also seeing phenomenal progress this cycle. So when folks ask me about what's going on this cycle, I point them to the local candidates that Forward has endorsed, some of whom I'm sure are here tonight. And so that number is, let's call it 135 or something along those lines. Though it does make me think, why aren't we endorsing the other apparently 5,000 and change that you guys have identified? So we certainly have our work cut out for us. So that's column one, is helping some of these candidates win. Number two is trying to have an icon that emerges from this movement after November. And I think the highest impact, highest leverage opportunity is a guy named Dan Osborne, who's running for Senate as an independent in Nebraska. He's essentially tied. The Republicans had to send $3 million to prop up Deb Fischer, which they did not want to do, because it's freaking Nebraska. Like, no one had on their bingo card, hey, we're gonna have to spend $3 million defending Nebraska. But for the people on this chat, it's going to be particularly fun to note that Dan's opponent, Deb Fischer, pledged to serve only 2 terms as a senator, and lo and behold, this would be her 3rd term. It was one of those situations. So it's really obvious to a lot of Nebraskans that Dan is a normal human being who just wants to make a change, and he's neck and neck. And one of the things that amuses me is, or excites me, is to think about Dan on cable news in January saying, like, Senator Nebraska I, or something along those lines. I mean, people will look up and say, wait a minute, you can have an independent senator, and that's very, very achievable. So that's a race that I'm very, very focused on. Ford's actually hosting a fundraiser for him tomorrow, virtual. So if anyone's into that. And then the other thing is the ballot initiatives that will make primaries more open and competitive, including implementing ranked choice voting in some cases. And so those states are Nevada, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Arizona. Oregon is doing ranked choice statewide. I think I got most of them with that little list of states. So the resources being brought to bear on those campaigns are considerable. The last number I heard was 75 or 80 million, and they were shooting to 90 million. And so they're very high stakes. The other thing that I heard was that all of them are close. So if you think about the swing states, in terms of the D versus R drama that, I'm sure we're all mindful of, even though we're trying to build this alternative movement, it looks very similar when you look at those ballot initiatives where there are 6 or 7 states that are all neck and neck in terms of yes or no. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. It's definitely an enormously significant 8 days or so.
Yeah, no, there's so much going on. And if you heard a state that you're in listed and you're not aware of what's going on with these campaigns for ranked choice voting or Dan Osborne, make sure to go check them out and show your support, because it's, really important for the wider democracy reform movement that goodparty.org is a part of, Forward's a part of, that we lift up, all of these different pieces of the puzzle here. And, I'll give a plug to Andrew for your TED Talk. I think did a really great job of painting the bigger picture of what's going on in the democracy reform movement. So if you didn't catch that, then just look up Andrew Yang TED Talk and you'll find it right away. Oh yeah, good. We got the full list in the chat there, which is great. So yeah, I think Andrew, thanks for the rundown. And, we got a lot of great questions that came in ahead of time, pre-submitted. If we end up having some extra time, we'll take some in the chat, but, given the number pre-submitted, we'll see if we can get there. And the questions, cover the independent movement, election issues and barriers, voter engagement, some questions for Andrew on just his philosophy on various topics. There were some questions on UBI. So I'm going to focus especially on, the political and democracy related questions first, since that's kind of our shared territory here. And then at the end, definitely sprinkle in some of the philosophy and UBI stuff as well. So sounds good. Should we dive in here?
Sure thing.
Awesome. All right. So Olivia Harper has the first question, wants to know what inspired you to start the Forward Party and how it differs from traditional political parties.
Oh, thanks for the question. I came to the conclusion that the two-party system was not going to solve our problems at the end of 2020. I remember typing the words and thinking, wow, am I signing up for X years of organization building and movement building? Farhad, what year did you figure out that the two-party system wasn't going to do it? Because I want to see how many years behind you I was.
I think we might have trouble unmuting him given the way the setup. I think it was 2012. I think 2012, right? Yeah, he's nodding. I think that's about right. Yeah,
I think he was something like 8 years ahead of me.
Citizens United, I know, was part of his wake up call. So that was 2010, and then I think two-party system.
Very, very wise. It's true. And so I figured it out a decade after Farhad, apparently, or so, and thought, well, oh my gosh, like how the heck are we going to get out of this? Because the polarization is going to get worse, the dysfunction is going to get worse, all the forces are getting stronger. And so I thought, well, the only way out would be to try and build some positive, independent third force movement. By the way, I'm just going to nerd out for a second because it's funny. I read a lot of comic books as a kid. And you know, some of like the very, very big comic books where when it was like one team against the other is like, you know, Secret Wars or Avengers versus Defenders, and a big crossover. And every once in a while, there would be a third force in these fights. And for some reason, I always thought that was like the most interesting plot line or comic book. So I thought, well, you need a positive, independent third party movement. And I realized that if you were to make a list of people that could potentially help kick that off at the end of 2020, I was probably on that list. Like, I don't know who else is on that list, but I was on the list. And so I was like, man, I can't in good conscience say we should do this and then be like, and someone else will do it. It would just be too lame. And you know, one of the things about being an entrepreneur is that you realize that very often no one will do it unless you do it. So that's how I started forward. It was really by typing those words on the page, because I don't know how much you guys know about book publishing, but you submit the manuscript and then it's maybe, you know, 5 or 6 months before it hits bookshelves. So I knew when I wrote those words and submitted the manuscript, I was like, okay, this thing's going to go public when the book hits the shelves, and then I have to try and be there ready to build.
Yeah, well, that's quite the pressure to put on yourself. You're like, well, the book's gonna go, so I guess, you know, got to get this party built up. So that's yeah, no, and I agree. It's like you gotta be the one. And I think a lot of, especially the candidates, you know, who are on the call today probably have felt that as well, of like, well, who else is gonna do it? You know, like I guess it's me. I'm gonna step up and run and take this mantle. And
Yes,
felt
everyone
like
who's a candidate. Yes.
yes. So
Way
thank
to
you.
go.
Yes, we love you in particular for what you're doing, because it takes a lot, as Andrew knows. So the next question is from Deborah Vinson. Why did you become an independent is her question.
Oh, you know, Deborah, this is something I need to write this up somewhere. I haven't shared aspects of it, but I thought, okay, people know me as a Democrat. I now think that you need to reform the structures in order to have any chance at like a future we'd find exciting. And so if I turn around and do something and say, hey, we need to reform everything, then everyone's going to think, oh, this is like a Dem plot to weaken, you know, Republican control of red states. So I was like, well, that's a loser. And you know, a necessary step is going to be for me to become an independent. And so I took a little video of my filling out the registration card. I thought it was just going to be a formality. It's like, who cares, you know? I mean, my vote doesn't matter anyway, given where I live. But it ended up being a very significant step psychically, and then also publicly. And I was stunned at how much energy and attention was paid. And this is kind of funny because, like, I know people know who I am and whatnot, but I did not think it was going to be that big a deal that I was leaving the Democratic Party. I was like, all right, it'll just be like a social media thing and whatever. It's like a formality I have to do in order to build a new thing. But instead, it got press for like, you know, like every major press outlet covered it. Like everyone, you know, came to try and, you know, cast, frankly, like their own opinion or judgment. And I got accused of all sorts of nefarious things, like really things that made zero sense. Because people were like, oh, you know, like he like wants to make money. And we're just like, wait a minute, like, how does going independent make me money? Like, can someone explain the math on that one to me? It turns out to have been like an actually a profound journey and transition in a way I had not anticipated. But the reason why I did it was because I knew that in order to build a new thing, you had to not be wearing a party badge or another.
Yeah, I can see why that caught fire in a way. I mean, for folks who don't know the recent stats, I mean, Gallup found earlier this year, over half of Americans are independent of all ages now. Historically, millennials and Gen Z in the past couple of years have been majority, but now it's, you know, everyone essentially. So there's a lot of people, you know, the majority who are independent, but it's a kind of a quiet thing, you know, like it's not something that people typically are, you know, again, changing their voter registration and putting that out there and making a big deal of it. So I think the way that you did that probably just spoke to a lot of people who, you know, behind the scenes are independent, may speak about that to their family and friends, but it's not, you know, it's not the big topic, right, in the way that it could be. So I think kudos to you for putting it out there in the way that you did.
Well, one thing I say, Victoria, is that you know how insecure the parties are by the way they attack anyone who leaves. You know, like if you leave a good, solid company with a good culture, they're just like, oh, best of luck.
Yeah, good luck on your new adventures,
Yeah,
not like,
yeah,
don't
but
you dare tell anybody
you
about our secrets.
if you leave like an insecure organization or like an insecure boss, they try and shiv you on the way out, you know, like you're never going to work again, like I'm going to get you. And the parties definitely resemble that more than they resemble the like, oh, best of luck on reforming our messed up system, like we actually could use the help. Instead it's like, oh, you're dead to us.
Yep. No, totally. It's true. Yeah. We had a question from our Discord. How does the Forward Party plan to address the challenges facing independent candidates in the two-party system? So what's Forward's angle on that challenge?
Number one, by partnering with Good Party so that the tech tools are being developed. On our side, what we have to do is we have to develop a following so that some of those people can volunteer or text bank or phone bank or knock on doors, maybe even vote, and then have donors who can help fund independence so that they're competitive. And so that's what we're trying to provide. It's not going to be built in a day, but you know, we do have some folks who love us and will take a look at candidates. One of the fun things of this period for me is that I occasionally call out an independent candidate, someone like Eric Settle, who's running for Attorney General in Pennsylvania as a forwardist, like just literally like, you know, F next to his name. And then after like a newsletter gets sent out, then Eric starts getting donations from around the country. And then he's then sends me a note being like, hey, like people all over are donating. So that's what Forward is going to try and do for more and more candidates.
Yeah, it's like shining a spotlight, and we're not in the fundraising piece of this at all. So it's actually a really important piece, especially for these bigger races that people are running, that tend to require a little more money. Our hope is we can drive the cost of elections down. That's our bigger picture goal here, so that it doesn't cost so much for people to run for office, especially local and state rep seats, right? But we're still a ways off from that. And so the work you guys are doing is really
Oh
important
yeah,
to shine
we're very, very
people.
complimentary. I mean,
Yeah.
what you guys are doing is phenomenal. You know, like we think that a little bit of money and volunteer energy and press spotlight can go a long way.
Absolutely. David Thompson, next question. He asked, how do you envision Forward Party's role in changing the current political landscape dominated by Democrats and Republicans? So what's your idea of the future, essentially, of the role Forward Party can play in changing this?
Well, when you talk about these hundreds, maybe even thousands of independent candidates winning office around the country, one of the things we want to do is create a home for those folks. So what does the average American think? Third party would be nice, but it's impossible. And then if you point them to, it's like, there are actually 800 elected officials over here that are Forward Party. That then they'll be like, huh, I did not know that. By the way, if you look up right now, what's like the largest number of electeds associated with party that's not the big two? I mean, I think you might be able to count it on, you know, a couple of hands. I mean, Forward is up to 40, and I think we might already be number one. So if you can imagine that being 400 or 2,000 or whatnot, then it's indisputable. It's like you have thousands of elected officials who are like, hey, I'm Forward Party. And the mayor of Fort Collins, Colorado, did this, and then her constituents said, what does that mean that you're Forward Party? She left the Democratic Party. Her name's Jenny Arndt. And she said, what it means is I just answer to you, my constituents, and not anyone else. And then her constituents are like, it sounds pretty good, actually. It's like, yeah, great. So imagine, let's call it 2,000 elected officials around the country. And then 5 to 10% of Americans saying that actually describes me better than the major parties. So you could fill like a giant hall or maybe even an arena with forwardists if you gathered everyone together, and then maybe just maybe a U.S. senator or two, and then that's actually a pretty thorough, undeniable picture of a third party where, if everyone's like, oh, we can't have a third party. It's like, we actually have two US senators. They'd be like, oh, really? Like that'd be bananas. And that's actually achievable. That might even be achievable as soon as January, if everything were to go incredibly well. So that's a picture that hopefully we can work towards faster than most people believe possible.
Yeah, one frame I'm sure you're very familiar with from the technology space is the early adopter curve, right? And so folks who are on the early adopter side, they get the new technology, they use it, they'll tell people about it. We're starting to reach out of that into the early majority, and that's where things really will start to build some momentum because the credibility is there, like you said. It's like, oh, you can't deny it now. Like it exists, it's there. So I think it's exciting the trajectory that we're on right now, and hopefully January is right on time, like you're saying. So, all right, we got Samantha Hayes. What are the biggest obstacles that you see to the growth of independent movements like Forward Party and GoodParty.org?
Gosh, there's so many obstacles. Where do I begin? I mean, it's so one of the reasons why Good Party is so powerful and necessary, and I hope Forward as well, is that anytime you had an independent candidate who ran for office, that person would have to start from scratch in terms of team and tools and notoriety and the rest of it. And let's say that party lost, which by the way would, probably happen because they would have an uphill climb. Then anything that they learned or developed or accrued would just disappear. And then the two parties would say, "Ha ha!" Like we knew it. And by the way, one of the ways the two parties enforce discipline is that um, they have vendor ecosystems where you have uh, consultants, yes, but also media buyers and advertisement um, um, uh, vendors and the rest of it. And so that there is no third lane. Good Party's trying to help with that. Forward's trying to help with that. But one of the things I will say, I mean, if you throw numbers on this thing, the two parties are going to spend about $10 billion this cycle. And our entire space, the level of resources is a tiny, tiny fraction of that. So that's that's the obstacle really, is that you're trying to disrupt two multi-billion-dollar behemoths, and then you're working with uh, small amounts of money and scrappy local officials. By the way, another obstacle in this is the press, and even I'm going to say um, theoretically aligned influencers don't necessarily want to reinforce what we're building because most of their viewers are accustomed to and maybe even prefer like the two party nonsense. You know what I mean? So that's another obstacle. Uh, as you can tell, it's considerable. Now, one of the things I say is like, what do we have going for us? 50% of the American people, the truth, you know, humanity, like the fact that the two parties are really just almost completely devoid of soul or solutions at this point. I mean, like if you if you get into it, one of the things I said last week at an event was that the solutions can only come from either the two major parties, which none of us really believe, or this movement. You know what I mean? And so if you ask me like which one they're going to come from, it's probably this movement. It's probably the people of the United States, probably independent candidates, probably Forward and Good Party. So that's the opportunity. I think that everything is going to end up coming our way because that 50% of Americans that say we're independents, that was only 25% in 92. So it's doubled since then. And if you look at the proportion of young people, it's even higher. Like how many young people are like, oh, like this is working great, and like I love this party. I mean, this party or that party. I mean that percentage is, I think it's something like a third. So our 50% is just going to grow, and you can sense the increasingly tenuous hold that the parties have. So I'd certainly bet on us, but the obstacles are considerable.
Yeah, totally agree. And I'll throw in a Farhadism here. Our founder Farhad is talks about the rational apathetics, which are a lot of, young people looking at this and going like, I don't see myself in that. I don't see myself being represented. So I'm just gonna opt out of this. And I think the work that Forward's doing, you're doing, our organization's doing is really meant to give people a reason, a reason to care, a reason to, put the apathy aside and have something they can actually see themselves in and plug into and help, make a difference there. So you can
That's
be.
one reason why the candidates are so important, is because it's harder to be apathetic if there's someone who's actually stepping up and running, and then you're like, oh, I'm a shithead if I can't support this person who's like, actually putting it out there. So thank you again to the candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got two kind of questions I think that nest together here. Eli Gardner asked, how does the partnership with goodparty.org fit into the Forward Party strategy for supporting independent candidates? And then Megan Carter asked, how can independent and third party movements better collaborate to increase their influence in American politics?
Oh, I do want to throw another obstacle out for independents, is that independents don't necessarily like to join a team. It's another tricky one. It's like you're trying to build a team out of avowed free agents, who are maybe even resistant to tribalism. So that's yet another issue. Now, the Good Party Forward Party partnership is so natural, it's crazy, because Good Party is just like, hey, independent, we want to equip you, and then we're like, hey, same, really, like, and we're not trying to equip them with the tech tools that Good Party is developing. We're trying to give them uh volunteers, press, money, to some extent organization and donors, like vendors, a little bit, consultants. We have multiple people who've run independent campaigns. One of them used to joke, it's like, I've lost more independent campaigns than anyone, which is probably true. So the partnership really couldn't be smoother. It's very simpatico.
Yeah, and I think the collaboration that we've been, building for a couple of years now is exciting. And, for folks who may be familiar or connected to the Libertarian Party, or Green Party, we work with candidates in all the third parties essentially, and independents and nonpartisans as well. So I think there's a lot of room here where we're kind of coming, up underneath essentially with the tools and the support. And that's connecting the dots for a lot of these folks who, like Andrew said, were, kind of free agents or in a smaller party on their own. So I think there's a huge opportunity for deeper collaboration here. And I think when we have wins on the board too, that just helps so much. It just makes it all so much easier, right, to get excited and rally around these candidates who become representatives of the people. And then we can help them do that better as well than Democrats and Republicans. So that'll
Yeah,
be
I can't wait to be able to point to some of the folks who are going to get in office. I mean, it's going to be great. The American people really are pretty desperate for a new option in their politics. And I talked to a guy named Rory Stewart who uh, ran for prime minister, the UK, and he said that this sort of thing happened in the UK where a third party came up. Now their system is actually more accommodating of it than ours, but he said it took everyone by surprise and it started locally. And I thought, wow, that's actually a very, very good uh, template for us in some ways. In their case, it was actually locally rural areas, folks who are kind of pragmatic and up the middle.
That's awesome. Yeah, I need to look into that one. That's good. Mason Lee, next question asked, what is your response to those who say third parties can only act as spoilers in elections?
Uh, that math just doesn't add up, because you have 500,000 plus local races and 70% of them are uncontested or uncompetitive. Like when people think third party can only be a spoiler, they're just thinking about one race, and that's the presidential, because that's the frame that everyone's been given. But if you look around, most every race is going to be uncontested. And one of the things that my colleague Carrie Healy says is that in most places we're not the third party, we're the second party, because maybe 39 of the 50 states have one party rule. You know what I mean? So like imagining that we're going to be a spoiler in Massachusetts or Missouri is factually inaccurate. Like what's actually happening is that each party has its turf, and the other party is a straw man, and then they just run things the way they want. And typically, the folks in that state are not always excited about it, and they want a choice. That most Americans are significantly voiceless and disenfranchised. So you know, what's interesting is that there's so many things that have been projected onto the American people to discourage third parties, because you know, like that, like my joke is that Americans are like those elephants that get tied in place when they're young by that rope. And then, you know, they think the rope holds them in place when they're fully grown, but it's not true. Like you could just move. and the rope is it is things like the presumption that they can only be a spoiler, or it can't happen.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's good just to look up these things. I mean, I looked up, and I'm in Chicago and Illinois, and there was a news article that pointed out, I think it was 83% or 86% of our elections were uncontested, like massive number of uncontested elections. So I think part of the work here is how do we inspire more people to run and contest these elections and do so as independents, as forwardists, you know, right? So that they're pushing the boundaries there. I mean, there's so much ripe ground here, and that's really the strategy, is how do we do this from the grassroots level and build up from there. Um, so Diane Giangrossi, apologies for the last name if I got that wrong. What is the best path forward for building a network of independent candidates without them being non-viable spoilers, siphoning away votes from the Democratic candidate in a general election? And I'll say, you know, this came from one angle, right? And, you know, we're across the political spectrum in our work. So I'd add Democratic, Republican candidate, you know, whichever way you want to look at it. So what's the, you know, nitty gritty, I think, here of how you see us really working on this?
Oh, so for this person, this questioner in particular, go to forwardparty.com and look at our endorsed candidates. And if you go through them candidate by candidate, race by race, you will find that I'm going to say virtually none of them are doing what you're afraid of. Like Forward Party is somewhat specific in that we think our role is to run against extremists, and so if there is or run against someone that has no competition, and so if your concern is that we're just going to go and like you know, upset the apple cart in a race where the person is fine, we genuinely try and avoid that. Now there are folks here who are you know, have a different approach, who are just like, let's just freaking go for it. And I actually don't have like, you know, like it's like a to each their own, you know. But Forward Party's sense of things is a little bit of like a physician-y do no harm. So we genuinely are trying not to you know, be the fly in the ointment. And I'll give you sort of the platonic ideal of a race for us is, imagine an independent running for U.S. Senate in Nebraska against, you know, a two-term incumbent who said that she would only serve 2 terms, and they're the only 2 people in the race. You know what I mean? Like that's actually a pretty great opportunity. So like, let's pile into that. And if you look at the Forward Party candidates, you'll see just, you can dig into each race and you're like, oh, in very, very few cases, is it someone running against someone who is like a straight up the middle moderate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's your guys' approach, and it makes sense. And I think we're a little bit more of, you know, the full gamut of people running, but again, it's so many local races, you know. One
Yeah,
counterpoint.
you know, it's just an approach. But for that particular
Yep.
questioner, you probably
Yep.
should go to Forward Party because it's, you know, it's a good fit.
Yeah, they'll be more up your alley there. And I just
Yeah.
want to add to, for a quick counterpoint to our first win, actually, for with Terry Vo, who got on the Nashville Metro Council. It's their city council. She was in a 3-way race and she won, you know, so it can happen. It can be done. You know, you have to look at the dynamics of the race, of course, you know, but I think there's absolutely opportunities even in 3-way races to get folks who are not with the 2 parties into them. So it's exciting. Um, all right. And then, you know, let's see. I think we already covered these questions. I'm going to move on to this one. Michael Heimel, he asks, how can somebody win an election if they don't want to take money from special interests and mega donors, especially if they're not necessarily wealthy?
So the main thing, and I see someone saying something about local races, which I agree with. One of the reasons why local races are such a great opportunity is that you can often become competitive just by knocking on everyone's door, because they're not that accustomed to that kind of outreach. In many cases, the incumbent or your opponent might just be resting on their laurels and haven't really worked that hard for a long time. I'll tell you a story of a former staffer of mine named Conrad Taylor, who became the youngest elected official in the state of New York when he was a college student, just by knocking on every door in the district like 2, 3 times, and then they won. He won, and it took everyone by surprise. But it was really like he just worked really hard. And a lot of these local races are actually built like that. Like the main thing you're going to use up is shoe leather. Like he genuinely went through multiple pairs of sneakers. He was knocking on a door a third time, and the person was literally like, "You've been here twice already. Like, you can not knock on this door again. Like, I'm voting for you already." There's like a basic human principle of reciprocity. And if you show up to someone else's, restaurant or home or place of work, there's already this, okay, you're coming to me. Let me hear you out. And so if someone demonstrates that commitment and passion and energy, you will get a lot of people just to come off the fence and be like, I don't even know what you're about, but just the fact that you're here, like, I'm more into it than I am like, your other person, your opponent who I've never heard of. You know what I mean? It's like a human thing. So it's one reason why these local races are such big opportunities, because it's not like a made of money situation. You can just work really hard. That said, if you look at a race like Dan Osborne, sorry to keep talking about Dan Osborne, but he just put out a social media thing where he showed it's like, I'm not taking anything from corporate PACs. Like I've got thousands of everyday Nebraskans who are donating $40 to me, and my opponent does not. Every once in a while, you can get that dynamic too. Now that is not the norm, but it is possible to compete.
Absolutely. Yep. Katie Zacharel asks, why is it so difficult for a socially liberal but fiscally conservative candidate to gain traction in today's environment? Will an independent party or forward party be the one to occupy this space?
Yeah, we want to help. There are a lot of Americans who would love for their candidate to resemble that, but neither party wants you to resemble that. So that's like the distortion that's happening. If you wind up with something like the Alaska top four system, where anyone of any party, and if Nevada votes this in, it's the same thing, then you could wind up with someone who is socially liberal, fiscally conservative, and just kind of in the middle of different issues, competing and winning. But right now it'd be very hard to get through either major party's primary. So if you want to run on that, certainly I think being an independent and forward and good party would be resources for you. Ideally, you have a voting system that encourages that kind of competition. It's one reason why structural reforms are really important to set the stage. But again, locally, you might not need them.
Yeah, and the hope too, I'll just add one thing there, is that, if that's the majority of views in your district as well, then you're trying to represent your district better ultimately. And so the hope is, we can in these races get people who are a better reflection of the people who live there elected, instead of them being, kind of shunted into these, national policy positions that get filtered all the way down to the local level in this kind of, like you said, distorted way, essentially. So if you can be that person to represent your community, then we want to help lift up your voice so that you can just run on your own issues, run on what you care about at the end of the day. And people who hopefully align with you, right, who are there, they'll vote for you. And if there's enough of them, you'll win. That's what we're trying to do here. So
yeah, it's one reason why these two mayors in Colorado, in towns next to each other, and they were friends, decided to join forward, is because they were tired of apologizing for in that case, the Democrats, around a bunch of national issues. They're like, it has nothing to do with my job. You know what I mean? It's like, what are we talking about here? So then they wanted to go independent, and then join forward as like a way to do that. There are a lot of local officials who I think would enjoy not having to apologize or explain for Team Blue or Team Red, because a lot of times their
absolutely.
job has nothing to do with it.
They're like, I didn't have anything to do with whatever happened in Congress today. Like I had
Yeah,
zero
yeah.
to do with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, Absolutely. Good question here from Andrea Kennedy Smith. How can Asian female candidates get support and mentorship outside the two-party structure?
Oh my gosh. So this is near and dear to my heart because I had a friend who was building a support network for Asian American candidates and was focused on Asian American women this cycle. And he passed away. His name was Don Sun. Even convened an event in Silicon Valley. But I know people who are trying to further his work. So let me think about how to help. Um, Actually, let me see. I'll see if I can put his son has continued his work, and let me see if I can put his son's info in the chat and then see what I can do. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry for your loss. That's
Yeah,
hard to lose good people like
look how
that.
specific this request was in my answer, huh?
Yeah,
So I'm
very
now going to
specific.
I just
Yeah, and
have
one
to put the number
while
in here. We'll be
while you're
good to go.
grabbing that too, I'll say too, I think part of what we're hoping to do, especially next year, is we already have a candidate community on our Discord, but hoping to do more kind of cultivated, groups, into next year for candidates and then for elected officials as well, so that you can find folks who are like-minded or have a similar demographic background to you, et cetera. So we're looking into ways that we can do that as well and help support there.
All right, I just put his son's number in there. If you drop him a line, see if you can be helpful.
That's great. Thank you. Remy Gallon asked, could antitrust laws be used against the Democratic and Republican Party for duopolizing American politics? And if you want to explain the duopoly thing, I think that would be good to throw in here too.
You know who actually once said to me, he's like, "Hey, if you can come up with an antitrust lawsuit, I will fund it." Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban said that to me, and we have not been able to find a lawsuit for him to fund. But if anyone here finds a lawsuit for him to fund, I would be excited. It is total nonsense what they do. Uh, but we haven't been able to find the right fact pattern or um, uh, or counsel probably. One of the interesting things is a lot of these law firms have actually kind of chosen either Team Blue or Team Red. So we'd have to find a law firm that's willing to burn bridges in this way. But if you find a lawsuit, Mark Cuban will fund it apparently. Let's follow up on that one.
Definitely. And Remy, who asked the question, just defined duopoly in the chat for folks. So I'll read that out loud too. Thanks, Remy. It's a two-party monopoly, so just like a company can take over an entire industry and monopolize, then, we essentially have a duopoly here where we have two that have taken over the system. So yeah, we would.
I'm actually going to share a random story that made me sad, but just to show how bad it is. I backed a guy named Dean Phillips who primaried Joe Biden up in New Hampshire. I was there because I thought that was a very, very worthy effort. And so Dean Phillips spent $5 million of his own money, and so he bought some ads in New Hampshire. They were really good, by the way, very scathing ads. It was like, "Where's Joe Biden?" It was like a Bigfoot themed ad where it's like, Joe Biden hasn't been seen here because he just hadn't been in New Hampshire. Anyway, the person who bought that ad for Dean Phillips was blackballed by the Democratic Party of New Hampshire. They said, "Hey, like, we're not going to work with you. No one's going to work with you." They really do try and punish you if you work with one of their competitors. They enforce discipline in those ways. So it's happening right now for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we have to build the alternative landscape across the board, like you said, media buyers even, right? So that they, people can essentially defect out of that, right? Because he was running in the Democratic Party system and that even
He
happened.
was
Like
a sitting
crazy.
member of Congress
I
running in
know.
a Democratic primary, and they still freaking shivved him. By the way, like Dean, Dean got primaried, so he's going to be out of his seat. And he was proven 100% right. Like Joe Biden ended up dropping out 6 months later. So, and like there's been zero like, "Oh shoot, Dean, sorry about that. Turns out you were right. Like, here's your job back or here's your career back." But it's instead they just freaking dogpiled on him. It was a sight. It's just dark. It's one reason why this movement is so vital.
Yeah, and I
It's
know.
probably, by the way, I saw a question about like, hey, trying to have one of the parties reform itself. You know, like these parties are not set to reform themselves. You know, I mean, you can see what happened with the Dems and Joe Biden. I mean, he was clearly declining and a terrible candidate against Trump, and they would just circle the wagons around him until the debate, and then by then, you know, it was late in the day. And even when a courageous member of Congress, in good standing, by the way, like vice president of the Democratic caucus, raised his hand and was like, "Hey guys, the bad idea," that they destroyed him. So you know, like this is not an org that wants to court reform.
I believe that's a lot of why you didn't end up going that route, essentially, right? Was your own experiences, within the party as well, correct?
Yeah, it's I mean that's definitely part of it, Victoria. I mean, I met a lot of Dems, and there's like I'm actually going to describe this to you. It'll be fun. Why not? So the Dems are like the last of the institutionalists. You know what I mean? Like the last of like that it's working credentially, like da da da. And then Trump took over the Republican Party and has kind of hollowed it out. And so now they're like the anti-institutional crew. But the Democratic Party, you can see how institutionalized they are, where it's like follow Joe, even though it doesn't make any sense. You know, and they use the media organizations as their comms arm and their disciplining arm. So I thought Dean was a great messenger for a reform case. And they, again, had wanted nothing to do with it. If it had been me, they would have been as harsh or harsher because, you know, I wasn't a sitting member of Congress or anything like that. And that was my read on the situation. When people told me about this, they were like, oh, the Democratic debates. I was like, they're not going to be any Democratic debates. Do you really think they're going to send Joe Biden up there to debate Marianne Williamson and you or whomever? You know, I mean, I did say this to people. I was like, these guys, like, you think that they're going to play fair. They're not going to play fair. So that's probably one reason why I made the choice that I made.
That's helpful. Yeah, thank you. Robbie Slaughter asked, do you think parties are better than independents? Your opinion on third parties like Forward versus independents, I suppose, here.
Well, so here's the question I have for you, Robbie, and it's so fascinating. This is like an intellectual exercise, and you guys are the right audience. So check it out. Let's say there are hundreds, even thousands of independent candidates, but we all agree, you know what? It would be useful if you had some institutional know-how and infrastructure and maybe donors and maybe comms and maybe all this stuff. So then what your mind goes is like, you know what you need? You need kind of like a federation of independents. And then and I'm going to make an argument to you all that is what Forward is. And exhibit, G or whatever, is that there was a party in South Carolina called the Independence Party of South Carolina, and they legally changed their name to Forward and just became Forward Party South Carolina because they wanted like a national partner, and then we wanted a state partner. We are the friendly, work with positive folks independent federation. It's like Star Trek. We're like the independent federation, and like my co-chairs are, Christy Todd Whitman, who's a two-term governor of New Jersey. And Christy and I work together great. Like, do we line up on every policy? I'm sure we don't. Are we totally unified on the fact that this two-party system is going to destroy us all and we need to create a competitor? Yes. And that's all that matters. So folks who were like, hey, let's make the independent thing work. Oh, but we need all these shared resources. I would argue to you that Forward is trying to be that glue, that network, that stitching together. And that if you join Forward, you will receive more than you will give. And by that, what I mean is like, we will not actually ask that much of you, but you might get goodies from us. Like the things we'll ask of you are things like, rule of law, like adhere to election results, try not to be an asshole, respect differences, be pro-reform. If you look at our pledge, it's almost that simple. And so and we don't ask you for money. I mean, if you had money, that'd be fantastic, but we're much more likely to send you money than get money from you. And that's somewhat unusual in party politics, because one of the strange things you guys might not know is that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party want money from their candidates. People think, oh, the party's going to send me money. The party's like, no, you're going to send us money. It's like the Spider-Man meme where they're like both pointing at each other, being like, give me money. So at least with Forward Party, we won't point at you. And I'm not saying we're going to send you a mammoth sum, but at least we don't expect you to send us money.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's the same over here. And thank you for the Star Trek reference. I'm a huge Trekkie, so love it. All right, we got Zoe Patterson. What are the Forward Party strategies for engaging younger voters who are increasingly disillusioned with the traditional parties?
So we now have an organization called Young Forwardists that's kicking off college chapters. We're very excited about. If you know college kids who want to look into this, just have them check out Young Forwardists. Very, very delightful, idealistic org. I'm going to actually say something that's going to be maybe interesting to some of you. A bunch of folks just joined Young Forwardists who were previously students for RFK. And they were not down with the Trump thing. And so what happened is students for RFK essentially RFK divided in two. And then some of the students went with RFK to Trump, and then the others said, we need a new home. And then they ended up joining Young Forwardists. So we think that there's a massive growth opportunity in terms of young people in college campuses. Another aligned organization that you all might want to check out is called Bridge USA, and they have dozens of chapters in college campuses around the country that they have convenings where everyone, actually tries to communicate openly, trying to encourage discourse, build bridges. That's why it's called Bridge USA. So we think that there are real opportunities among young people because they definitely do not love the two parties.
Definitely, yes. All right, next one, we got Samuel Hawkins. What, in your opinion, is the best defense against the misinformation campaign that was launched pre-COVID and is still convincing many voters that their vote won't make a difference? So misinformation about your vote and perspectives on that.
Could the person clarify a little bit? Because the fact is most of our votes don't matter most of the time. So the misinformation, I mean, not to be cynical, but I think many of us are here because we know that most of the time our votes don't matter. I mean, Farhad lives in California. When's the last time his vote mattered in a presidential? Like never. It is the same for me over here in New York. I think one of the things we're trying to do is make it so our votes matter more.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, locally, that's where your vote especially can matter, I think is the point of all these local and state races in particular. Because like you said earlier, people just talk, we talk about spoiling the election. People just think presidential, right? And the electoral college, to your point, California, New York, vote doesn't really matter. Illinois, same here. It's going to go one way. So I think it just comes back to those local and state races and look at who's on your ballot, see if you can make a difference with your vote there.
Look, so I think Deborah saying that please vote, I agree. Please vote. That said, like I voted today, and there were essentially no choices. My ballot. It was essentially pre-filled out for me. With the exception of the presidential, which also will not matter. And if it matters in New York, then we're in a whole nother universe. So both of these things are true. Please vote. Get your vote in. But also we have a lot of work to do to make our votes matter more and to have choices locally or federally.
Absolutely. And I'll just put one quick plug here. We actually just recently released a map with all of our candidates on it, goodparty.org/candidates. And I'm like, I've been working on this for years and years in the background here. And for the first time, there's a goodparty.org independent candidate on my ballot for school board, which was like so thrilling to get my ballot in the mail and look. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is one of our candidates. So you never know. There's still, there's a lot of places in the country, so it's not going to be there won't be one on everyone's ballot, but in case you get lucky like me, you can help support the rising tide here of independents and folks who are coming up. Well, let's go to the next question.
100%. If you find someone to be excited about when you're running, then not only should you vote for them, you should probably get the word out.
Yes, exactly. Laura Hampton, she asks, how do we get people re-engaged in local government? It's a good question.
A lot of it is going to be based on a candidate who's willing to work really hard. Um, Even local publications now barely cover these races. It's quite sad. And so you need to just have someone who will hustle and then have a few people around them who become just their hype people. By the way, hype people are extraordinarily powerful. If someone just came in here and is like, Victoria's amazing, I've been working with her for years, she walks on water, you're like, oh shoot, like I really need to pay attention to that. More so than anything that Victoria herself can say or do. So if you find a local candidate that you like and you just start showing up to things and hyping them up, it's very, very powerful. But I think that's the path now, is beating the drum locally. Certainly use social media if you got it. I mean, it's fine. But don't think that the media is going to have some spotlight, because these local papers just don't have the staff anymore to cover it.
Hype people's a good phrase. If you're the one who just like talks up your, the latest local restaurant or the cool thing happening in your friend group, you'd probably be a really good hype person to help a local candidate. So you should.
Yeah, really use that. I will say too, I've been a candidate, obviously, but I was Dean Phillips's hype man, and it was so much fun. I will say that being a hype person is easier and more enjoyable than being a candidate. Because being a candidate, check it out. I mean, this is what happened. We'd get together a group of, sometimes the group is quite large. Let's call it even, a couple hundred New Hampshire primary voters in New Hampshire. And then I would come out, just spend 3 to 4 minutes being like, Dean Phillips is going to save us. Dean Phillips. Yeah. And then leave. And then Dean Phillips had to be there for, like 45 minutes taking questions on this. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I remember being the candidate. Like, this is so much easier. Like, I was just in the back, like texting my wife, chilling. So I highly recommend being a hype person, because every candidate needs one very, very badly.
It's good. It's a good role. Hopefully we inspire some people to be that. Love it. Jim Gillis asks, what plans do you and Ford have to combat the rising cost of running for office?
We think that the opportunities are going to be local, where the money hasn't saturated as deeply. And we think that there's going to be an occasional outsized opportunity. And if we make enough progress, then we can become the get money out of politics party, which, by the way, something like 85% of Americans agree with, to try and diffuse it and weaken it. But in the meantime, we have our work cut out for us. We got to win a bunch of local races. I will say again, the local races are more winnable with blood, sweat, and tears. And then you take occasional shots on goal. And again, I'll call out Dan Osborne as an example. Like most people, if I were to tell you, hey, you can win a Senate race as an independent against an incumbent, you'd be like, psh, like that doesn't seem possible. And you'd be like, oh, there it is, like neck and neck. 2 years ago, it was Evan McMullin against Mike Lee. This year, it's Dan Osborne against Deb Fisher. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen again and again, because again, both parties are weakening, and like people are fed up. And if you have like a credible contender, the interesting thing is the Dan Osborne phenomenon. So check it out. Evan McMullin was a former presidential candidate who was a CIA operative. It's like a credible dude. I think he went to Wharton, worked in the Middle East, like he had a profile, a bit of a funding network, was running in Utah. You're like, okay, I get it. I get that person running as an independent. Dan Osborne, a mechanic, in one of his commercials, he's like, I don't even own a suit. His hands are covered with tattoos. He worked at the local Kellogg's plant. He's a U.S. Navy veteran. And he's competing mainly because he just seems like such an ordinary guy. And you cannot convince anyone in Nebraska that he's like a corrupt corporate shill, because he just does not feel like that at all. And he did not have any money. So the profile is going to change in each place. Even if you were to ask me, like, who do I think it's going to be? I would have bet some pissed off businessman, who had some money. But instead it was a mechanic who was a Navy vet, who was just a good dude. So it just goes to show that, that you're going to have opportunities you can't anticipate, and then you just have to try and lean into them.
Yeah, and maybe you can add to that a little bit more too. I mean, we just talked about how, oh, your vote, may not matter depending on where you live in the presidential race. The reason for that is, these states are so gerrymandered to go one way or the other. So when you have a situation like, a Utah or Nebraska, where, in this case, they're both typically red states. And so the Democratic Party was like, we're just not going to run anybody. There's room then for an independent to step in and take that lane and make it a competitive two-way race. And it can happen the other direction too, as well. So,
Oh yeah, I think it's going to happen the other direction in California upcoming. I think there's going to be like an independent who's just like, hey, like guys, Dems not doing such a great job here. So it can happen both directions. And it's one reason why someone like me, and I'd urge most of the people here to resemble this, is you got to look for opportunities that may not be where you vote or live. Like, I mean, I think this Nebraska race is hugely important for anyone in the independent movement. And there's nothing stopping us from phone banking or text banking people in Nebraska. There's nothing stopping us from sending $50 to Nan Osborne. There's nothing stopping us from, bugging our mailing list in Nebraska, which I did do. So, it's, it's like a little bit of, I was going to say jujitsu. It's like, you figure out what the opportunity is, and then you try and, apply force opportunistically.
absolutely, yeah. And Dan is also with goodparty.org, independent, people powered, anti-corruption, civil. I mean, he's the full package, guys. So you gotta check him out if you haven't.
Yeah, and then none of us saw him coming,
Yeah, absolutely. So Gwen Samuel, I think this one will be near and dear for you. Any words of advice for first-time candidates? I know we have some of them on the call right now. So what's your advice?
My advice is to first try and make a game or competition out of the things that you're doing, because it can just make it, like make the dynamic more enjoyable. And which is related to my main lesson, which is just try and enjoy aspects of it, even though some of the things you're doing seem frankly not very enjoyable. But if you say to yourself, you know what, this might be the only time I run for office, like I should relish this experience, I should relish talking to these people, I should relish the relationships, because any campaign of any um, energy, you'll end up becoming closer to some people. One of the things I've said, and Farha and other entrepreneurs know this, is that you say, anytime I do something significant, I make friends and I lose them. And you think, well, how do you lose friends? And what happens is, like, you decide to run for office, let's call it school board. And then some of your friends don't do shit. And you're like, what the hell happened there? You know what I mean? Like I showed up to your, like, barbecue every year, and like, you can't do anything for me. And then people that you barely know or don't know, all of a sudden are dropping everything to help you. And that can be a beautiful experience. So if you appreciate the folks that step up for you in ways big or small, if you appreciate the relationships that you form, if you appreciate even like that person that you never realized was paying any attention to what you're doing, and then they come up to you and just like, thank you for running or something like that, then it can become a very, very energizing experience. So that's really it, is to lean into those positive aspects and try and enjoy yourself, because unless you're an unusual human, like, you don't know if you're going to do it again. You know what I mean? So it's a growth experience. It's once in a lifetime, maybe. It's the kind of thing that a lot of people think about doing or dream about doing, but don't do. And you're going to end up with uh, like a set of experiences that's irreplaceable.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Alex Pang asked, now we're kind of into the philosophy section. So we made it through all the election related stuff. So good job. So Alex asks, what ideal system do you propose for a country struggling with partisanship? What would be your ideal system here?
My ideal political system?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I kind of read this too, the struggling with partisanship. So
Oh, no,
probably
no,
gets into some of the
I dig
reform
it. I
space.
dig it. So here's my argument to people. The worst number of political parties you can have is one. The second worst is two. The third worst is three. And then people give a little bit of a laugh, because then you can just keep on going. But the dynamic improvement between two and three is massive, because right now with two, you literally have parties that are rewarded for letting a problem linger as opposed to solving it. Whereas if you even had three, then you could say to both sides, it's like, look, you can't just blame the other side. Like, we're here, we're willing to work, we're open for business. And so that's something that we can achieve. Even the people on this Zoom can meaningfully move us towards having a third viable party in this country. And that's right there for us. The ideal system in my mind is moving towards multi-member districts and proportional representation through the Fair Representation Act. Then you'd have a genuine multi-party system. That would be the ideal. When I asked a political scientist what the ideal number of political parties was in the United States, he said 5, 6, or 7. And that's based upon international comps. But also, if you think about it, today's Democratic Party should be 2 parties. Today's Republican Party should be 2 parties. You'd have 1 party in the middle and then 1 party on either side, and that gets you to 5 or 6. And that would be a much more functional system. It would also make us more resistant to autocracy and authoritarianism. I think there are a lot of people that follow Trump because they just don't like the Dems. You know what I mean? Like they're not like huge Trump fans, but it's just like, oh, it's like I'm anti-bureaucracy or anti-woke or anti-something. And so you have this 2-party system that makes someone feel like I gotta be in this universe because that universe is not for me, or thinks people like me are bad, or whatever it is. So if you even just change that dynamic, you might save the republic. You might save the country. If you make it so that's like, look, I'm not for you, but I'm also not over there. I'm going to suggest that probably describes most of us, most of the people on this call. Certainly describes me.
That's great. Yeah, that's a vision to go for. So we're working on it. Daniel Collins asked, how do you break the ideological capture of mainstream media and its reactionary right-wing counterparts? And I'd expand that too. I think there's reactionaries on all sides at this point as well.
I think it's very much analogous to what we're doing politically, which is we need to build our own freaking media networks and efforts. And there are folks in this camp. Now, one of the things I will say, like even the folks that I consider us very, very aligned with haven't just been like, you know what, screw it. We're like forward party. Like that's not been their jam yet. But there are a bunch of folks who spiritually should be forward party because they're super aligned with us. And we should just build our own. I mean, this media landscape is so fragmented, and the traditional cable networks are under an enormous economic pressure. They have aging viewers. Everyone's cutting the cord. Like that stuff's dying out. And so you're seeing this proliferation of other networks and personalities and podcasts and the like. And we just need to keep on building.
I'll give a plug too for anyone who likes a little bit of sanity with their news. Allsides.org is a great one. There's a number of these, who put the left, center, and right headlines all next to each other, just to, give you a little bit of a break of the spin. So definitely recommend those types of things to help your brain out. We have an interesting question from Christopher Reynolds. I'm curious how you're going to tackle it. How can spiritual leadership and community building shape the future of our political and economic systems? So where does spirituality or community building play into this for you?
I think it's a missing piece for a lot of people. It might be a missing piece for our politics. And I was hanging out with a guy named Rainn Wilson, who some of you know from TV. And he's very spiritual. He wrote a book called Soul Boom, and he thinks America needs a spiritual revolution. And I was looking at it as like, he's not wrong. And one of the things that I hope forward becomes is values based enough where it makes people feel better about themselves, to join, to meet with other people, just to hang out. I mean, a lot of these movements are pretty straightforward. It's like, am I going to meet people I'd like? Am I going to meet people I can be friends with? Am I going to meet people I can maybe even work together with to do something positive? And if you can do that, you're filling an enormous need in the country, because there aren't that many places where people feel like their values aligned. I think organized religion is declining, and then there's something of a vacuum. And so I wish that there were more spiritual movements that could give people a sense of peace and direction and community. This has got me thinking, like, Farhad, are you spiritual? You seem like a very spiritual human to me. But and I think a lot of spiritual people also despair the tribalism of our politics. That like if you're spiritual, you're not like, oh, this blue-red combat is great. Like, that's, I mean, Rain, as an example, just thinks that the parties are very, very negative in their effect on people and their spiritual health.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting space to try and dig out a little bit more. And then I want to get into the UBI questions we had as well here. So Dennis Lambert asks, where are we with UBI? How far are we from passage? What's needed for this to gain momentum? And if you want to give the quick rundown on UBI for those who aren't familiar too, I think that would be great.
So UBI is universal basic income. AI is going to do a number on a lot of jobs. 44% of American jobs are either repetitive manual or repetitive cognitive. And it's starting to affect coding and design jobs and different jobs. So I was of the opinion, and still am, that we need to think bigger about the economy of the future. In terms of where UBI is legislatively, so there are a couple of dozen communities that are working on some version, some for specific populations like foster children, which I'm not mad at. If you go to Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, you can see that group. I will say, unfortunately, those mayors are, last I checked, uniformly Democrats. Many of them are, leading communities that aren't thriving in various ways. Um, the giant stepping stone to UBI that I think is actually feasible in the near term is the return of the enhanced child tax credit that alleviated child poverty by about 50% in 2021. And this reminds me a little bit of my friend Jonathan Haidt, who some of you may know from his latest book, The Anxious Generation, where he said, look, social media bad for our mental health. You can make a broad argument. He's like, but if you just center on kids, then people are like, oh, it's hard to defend whatever is going on. And the same is true with poverty. It's like, if you show child poverty and be like, hey, that's actually very, very addressable. It's like we can help families with kids like get out of poverty. So that to me is like the first major step, because that's achievable and documentable, has profound effects downstream, and then we can build from there.
Yep, that's huge. And I'll give another little plug for work that Farhad and I do as well for gifted savings, and same angle that we found is high school students. Again, people can't argue with, hey, let's give gift savings to high school students that will be in the market and teach them how investments work and how those grow over time. And so we're doing some pilot projects with low-income adults in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and then also with a number of high schools, and that's growing at this point. So it's exciting to see
gifted savings is awesome. You guys are great.
Yep.
That was very, very on point.
Yep. A lot of different angles to take on this stuff, right? It's a huge well.
Basically, we should just put Farhad and his team in charge of everything, and then everything would be better.
We can only do so much, but we try. We really try. And then to your point earlier about, UBI has mainly been taken up by Democrats. Marcus Garcia was asking, how do you propose UBI to the Republican Party and get some of those folks on board with what you're doing with UBI?
So one reason why we're focusing on kids and families with this enhanced child tax credit is that there are actually some Republicans who are warm to it because it's pro-family. So we think that this is an edge that we can then use to sort of build in. And it turns out that a lot of the communities that are looking for a path forward are in rural states and red states. And the numbers show that Americans of every stripe actually are very open to reducing poverty in various ways. But we think that the families and children are the way to get Republicans on board. And by the way, that's not hypothetical. Like, there are actual Republican legislators who have already signaled that they're very, very pro these family measures, to the point where a partial revival of the enhanced child tax credit passed this Congress about 6 months ago by over 100 votes. So it wasn't like that typical, like, yeah, like, it's like most legislators in Congress said we're okay with a partial revival of the enhanced child tax credit. Now, in that case, it had pay-fors that were very good in terms of R&D, for like giving businesses credit for R&D. I mean, so like, Republicans had a very justifiable commercial element. But we think we can get this done, and we think Republicans are on board with it. So my version of gifted savings that Farhad has is that I started a lobbying organization called Humanity Forward, and they're in DC, and they just go into members of Congress office being like, hey, we've done the research and your constituents don't like poor kids. You should have fewer poor kids in your district. And then the members are like, interesting. Who do you guys represent again? So we, like, the Humanity Forward just literally does this work in DC every day, and they tell me which members are open to various measures. Believe it or not, we're spending 7 figures on lobbyists trying to fight poverty.
I didn't know about that, actually. That's awesome to hear. It's really good.
Farhad's not the only do-gooder on this call.
Yes, no, you're definitely in good company there, Andrew. So I think you got your cred there. And then just one more on UBI. Mary Vent was asking, what solutions do you propose for helping people, especially women, who do essential but unpaid work, such as caring for our nation's young, elderly, and disabled, to help them escape poverty? And would UBI be a part of that solution?
Oh yeah. I mean, one of the examples I used on the trail all the time was that my wife was at home with our son who's autistic, and like, what does the market value her work at? And everyone thinks about it, they're like, 0? And they're like, yeah, even though we know it's perverse. And it's some of the most difficult and impactful work anyone can do. And so that's for a child or for your, ailing parent or sibling or whomever. And so I think we should be recognizing different forms of work, different forms of value. My ambition in this space is actually even a step further than UBI. It's a human-centered economy where you have caregiving and nurturing as a whole, um, like economic objective, and then you have health and wellness and fitness as another one, and then you might have arts and creativity as another one, and you actually build up separate economies and even separate currencies. But my campaign manager told me never to speak of this ever again, because they said it's hard enough getting everyone on board with the magical Asian man from the future who wants to give everyone money. As soon as you start introducing multiple currencies, everyone's brain shuts off. But so I think there should be like a whole ecosystem around caregiving. But in the meantime, UBI would be a place to start.
That's good. Awesome. All right, we're in the home stretch here. Last couple questions. So Collie Harrington asked, what can I do to help third-party candidates have a chance? And they added, I'm an RFK Junior supporter. So what can they do to help third-party candidates at this stage?
Be their hype man. Like, find someone who's running as an independent and be like, yo, like that they're the best. If they're somewhere near you, like, go there and just like walk around, like, hyping them up. If they're not near you, try and find your friends on Facebook who might be around them. Bug your friends, and help build like mini tribe of folks who are down, because you'll bother your friends, and then some of them will be like, "I don't bother me," and then a few will be like, "Oh, I'm actually kind of into this." So one of the great learnings of my last number of years that I'm now flying in the face of, which is, it's unfortunate, but whatever. People care most about other people, and when I say that in this context, it means they care most about candidates. Like, this particular person got attracted to RFK and now is like, hey, let's try and make it happen. so find someone who, maybe is not running for president like RFK was, but find someone who excites you and then try to lean into their campaign. I'm actually going to nominate, just for fun, Dan Osborne is running for Senate in Nebraska because he's an independent. And he says when he gets to DC, he's not going to caucus with either party. And one of the things we joke about is like, wouldn't it be fun just to have them have to create a new cafeteria and a new cloakroom and all that other bullshit? You know, like that alone would be like, hey guys, guess what? Like there are more than two parties in this fucking country, and I'm in the new one, so not going to sit with you guys. I mean that's right there in front of us right now.
Oh my God, I would love that so much. It'd be so good. All right, Kiani, Arikeos, I'm so sorry, I don't know how to say your last name, asked, how can an independent candidate align themselves with Forward even though their state hasn't organized officially?
Oh yeah, I mean that's actually very easy peasy, because we're not official in most of the states. I think we have ballot access in 7 of the 5, like the easy 7 or something like that. But we have a state chapter in most all of them, and you can be forward aligned without your state having us on the ballot. So you can just go be like, if you go to Forward Party nationally, or in your state, and just say, hey, I'd like to affiliate with you. You don't even need to say on your page or anything, I'm like running as a forwardist, because we know that might not be for everyone in every race, and it might not add value. We're trying to help you. But yeah, we'll be happy to affiliate with you. I mean, at a minimum, you'll get like a little bit of love and a little bit of resources, and you don't need to necessarily like have an F next to your name.
That's great. And then this question's from Ethan Wright. What advice do you have for people who want to get involved in supporting independent candidates or movements like Forward and goodparty.org? So I would love to hear that from you on Forward, and then I'll add goodparty.org at the end.
Yeah, we need your help. And the easiest thing you can do is just join Forward Party in your state, and then pick one candidate to help in a way, big or small. So be like, you know what, my favorite candidate is this person. I'm just going to make some calls, text back for them, da 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 da. And one of the things I tell people is that your friends will pay attention if you are doing stuff. Like if you say, hey, like check this out, your friends may or may not pay attention. But if you are showing up for a candidate, then your friends will be like, wait, what are you doing? What's happening? This is like a higher level of commitment. One of the ways that I've been successful-ish in life is just being higher commitment than other people. It's actually a pet peeve of mine when people are like, oh, someone should do that. It's like, you want to do that? And like most people will be like, I don't want to do that. So like I have been the guy who's just been like, screw it, I'll do it. It's like, what's the worst that could happen? Now I'm not saying that everyone here should, move or run. But if you decide to put some elbow grease into it, you'll be surprised that will actually initiate some action on the part of the folks around you, because they'll just see it. And again, it's that reciprocity principle. It's like, oh, someone cares enough to do this, like, let me dig in a little bit more.
100%. Yeah. And I hope folks who have been tuning in here just feel it, right? The independent movement is rising. It's getting bigger, it's getting stronger. If you missed the very beginning, we have 6,647 candidates as of 2 hours ago. It's probably up to, close to 60, 550 at this point. It's, growing. We're projecting close to, or at least hopefully 2,000 wins, next week. So, it's really a great time to just dive in here, and it's a bottom up groundswell that's happening. So if you've been on the fence about like, is this worth my time? Is it time to put a little bit of, that sweat in, to try and help? It's definitely the time. So you've already leaned in, spending some time here today. You can plug in even more through Forward Party, like Andrew mentioned. If you're really bold and brave, run for office, or consider running for office next year. Or convince someone that you trust to run for office. Who in your life would you think, oh my gosh, if my friend so-and-so or this person who I've worked with before so-and-so who's so competent, smart, capable, was the one running my local government, things would be way better. Go talk to them. Go say, hey, have you considered running? And then they can do that, with goodparty.org's tools. They can consider joining forward. I mean, that's a huge way to help. And then if you want to dive in and help elections that are happening next week, you can help local independents win. We've got text banking that's going on for candidates. And then we also have election night reporting. So text banking is really easy. You can do it from the comfort of your computer. And then election night reporting is pretty fun if you ever wanted to be the one who's like looking up the races and seeing, how they're doing and what's going on. We'll train you really quick on how to do it. It's something you can do while you're watching your news of choice with what's going on at the federal level. But we have over 6,000 races we're going to have to capture results for. So it's a pretty fun, low-key way to help out and help make a difference with finding out how many wins we're actually going to get. And then there's the Discord community as well, which Quinn will post. And the final thing, if you're like, okay, I want to see what happens. I'm curious to hear how many wins, get on the board for the independent movement, what's going to happen for 2025. We're going to have an event virtually on December 3rd that we're calling Independent Victory to Velocity, 1,000 wins and counting. Hopefully we can update that to 2,000 wins and counting. So we're going to share the rundown on who won, some really inspiring stories from those folks, and then also share our game plan for 2025. So where are we focused? What's the strategy? What are we going to be getting after? So if you want to join that, we'll drop RSVP links as well in the chat so that you can join us on December 3rd. So lots of ways you can get involved. Really ripe time to do so. Andrew, any closing thoughts for folks here as we part ways here?
No, just thank you again, Good Party, and thank you to the candidates who are running. Thank you all for being here. I hope you can feel that the independent political landscape is getting stronger, more interesting, more vibrant, more energized, because the average American now does not think it's working. If you were to rewind even a number of years, people would be like, oh, like, do we really need that kind of thing? Now everyone thinks we need it. They just don't know it's possible. But this is like many journeys where it's going to take a hardy band of dedicated folks to break the early ground. And then people will look up and say, oh my gosh, like what's happening? 1,000 candidates, 2,000 candidates, ex-electeds, maybe a senator, and we're the folks making it happen. If you're here today, then you're part of this vanguard. So thank you for helping carve a path for this country of ours that we can actually be excited about. That's what I know motivated Farhad. Farhad's like, this stuff is not going to fix itself. And I've now joined Farhad in this fight. Thank you all for joining us and for making it happen.
Absolutely. And thank you, Andrew, for joining us. I saw Farhad in the chat putting the anatomy of an exponential for our math fans. I think I'm seeing that curve when I look at the numbers every week. It is an exponential curve right now. So it's totally the time, to get on board because it's really fun to be part of something that goes exponential. I'll tell you that. It's been so exciting. So get a little more involved, get plugged in. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, for the chat. The chat's been blowing up. Love to see that. And we hope that we'll see you on December 3rd. We hope you'll stay tuned for how many wins get on the board next week. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks all. Let's make the next 8 days count. Appreciate it.